Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's TAD Talks, Toward Authentic Dialogue. I'm Yugal Kishordas. Bhakti Rasa is here with me. And today we have Deva Madhava that we're bringing in virtually from Michigan. And I'm sure some of you in our group and outside of that and in many groups probably know Deva Madhava. He's been around for about 15 years or so practicing Bhakti yoga. And he is a sort of founder of a group that they call Harmony Collective in Michigan. Um, I have not been there personally yet myself, though now I'm intrigued because I'd love to see their Sri Sri Gaur Nitai deities. They have a school, they have a small farm property some miles away. And Deva Madhava is also acts as a mentor, a devotee mentor to some dear friends of mine. So I hope everybody joins me in welcoming him today.
Thank you, Yugal. Thank you, Bhakti Rasa. Always happy to spend time with the Tadatmya Sangha. I'm a big fan and like to think myself a friend of Maharaj, so always happy to be a part of the Sangha that he's curating.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you here, Deva Madhava. You have a very you bring a certain perspective to things. I really appreciate your clarity on things and your willingness to just be open and honest and fearless, really fearless for the sake of service. You're fearless. So really appreciate those qualities in you.
It's so wonderful to hear the Vaishnavas describe my confrontational nature. It makes it sound so much better. Thank you, Bhakti Rasa.
I mean, somebody has to do it.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about that recently because I just had a series of sharings on one of the recent issues in the ISKCON Sangha, perpetual issue of the child protection situation. And I got, I always get a few messages of like relief. People are just like, thank you so much. And I wanted those words, but I couldn't find them. And that's just how I feel. And I can see also I don't have to like give up Krishna consciousness because it's separate from this political situation, like very sweet messages, affirming messages. And then I always get a couple of like, who are you and how dare you kind of stuff. And one of my replies, one of my, you could say like standard replies to that now is I feel the need to say these things because you didn't say them 20, 30, 40 years ago. Like if you had just done the necessary thing back when it could have been yours to do, then it wouldn't be so backlogged and it wouldn't have aggregated to such an aggravated point that now, yes, the only way you can do it is to poke the sleeping bear. Like that's the only thing left to do. So we have to do that now. But it could have been a conversation some time ago. It could have been more of like a gradual collaborative experience, but we're way past that now.
Yeah, I can see that, and this is part of what we're trying to do here is to create a conversation. And just like you said, those people wrote to you saying, "Oh, you were my voice."
Mm.
So we're hoping that this will also provide a voice for people, and actually that they'll actually even come on here and be able to speak for themselves. But if not, at least we can begin the conversation and carry it on. So I hope whatever you would like to say that you feel comfortable in using this as the place to be able to say it. This is toward authentic dialogue. We want to bring these things to the table about child protection, about how things have fallen away, what could have been done over the last 20 years that we need to fix now.
Mm. Yeah, well, I I appreciate that invitation, and I would always, with yourself here especially, I feel safe to just be myself, and I'm not worried about who that is at this point in my Krishna consciousness. If Krishna was going to get rid of me, it would have been a long time ago for other things. I don't think I'm going to say something in a podcast now that's going to revoke my Vaishnav Sangha privileges. And so I was reminded a few days ago in a conversation with a devotee and a sadhu, like somebody I really respect and appreciate. And I was hearing them speak about politics, and they said, I don't do politics. And I get that. It's kind of like saying I don't do family. The person's a sannyasi also. So in a sense, like they're allowed to say they don't do politics. But really the rest of us, we have to stop saying that, because politics is definitely a dirty word, and it's easy to mess up and it's easy to get wrong. But saying I don't do politics is like saying I don't do money. It's like saying I don't deal with my body. I'm above that. I'm beyond that. It's just naive and it's escapist. We all have politics. Politics is just the management of power between relationships. And there's always power present in relationships. That's the point of them. So one of my soapbox things is to really just help devotees become comfortable with like a general civic awareness, so to speak, of what are the politics in our sangha. And if we avoid them, then we're just going to get all the problems that you get with avidya, avidya, ignorance. Like you just pretend it's not there until it cripples you, until it ruins you. You can pretend and pretend and pretend, but the day you're forced to become present to it is the day that you lose everything because of this backlog of toxicity. So to kind of embrace politics and recognize its natural influence in your life doesn't mean that you have to become a manager or a politician, so to speak, but to be aware that those dynamics are present, to understand what are the healthy expressions of that, what are the toxic expressions of that, and how to address it when it starts to trend that way so that it doesn't get to something that's like chronic and nearly incurable, is something that I take as a point of advocacy, you could say.
Yeah, or really a mandate, right? Um,
Mm.
no, we might not all be politicians, but we are all by default citizens of some city, of some country. You
Mm.
can't help but be that.
Yeah.
And
And the
therefore, yeah, that alone kind of folds us into the political mix.
right. And then if the other side of it is, of course, the dangerous side, the ugly side always becomes this idea of like membership being equated with salvation. And so whatever benefit there may be in the arena, whether it's something spiritual or something mundane, the benefit comes through membership. It doesn't come through integrity. It doesn't come through right action. And that is its own set of problems. And so that's many people dismiss politics rightly on that level. And I think our title today was Don't Tread on Me. And so this is from the American Revolution kind of era. There were the states, the United States of America. There's a big discussion in the early part, and still in some ways, although mostly philosophical these days. But there's a big discussion in the early founding of the country as to whether or not there would be a real federation. Like, would it be a top-down command and control from one place? Everybody else follows the dictate of those guys.
Like
Uh,
Rome, right?
Centralized, right? Like Rome, kind of centralized. Although Rome also did well in like letting their people be their people spread out across. That's the success of Rome was in that. And when they stopped doing that, that's when they fell. But there's the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And the Federalists, they wanted like big and bureaucratic. And then the Anti-Federalists, they wanted small and basically separate, together for the things that it makes sense. But otherwise, the states should be left to make their own choices. And so this don't tread on me, and there's a snake, and the snake is made up of the 13 different colonies. The segmented body of the snake is the 13 colonies of the United States. And so it's an age-old question. And that's something that I think in Vaishnav Sangha, we're so special and we're so unique and we're so different from anything that's ever happened because Mahaprabhu's mercy. And so then we lose sight of like the basic human dynamics that are all the time going on that we also have to deal with ourselves. And we could learn some things from history. We could learn some things from looking at other organizations, looking at other groups, and seeing how they have or haven't addressed these questions and come up with helpful answers. We could learn some things ourselves, recognizing that we are also, in some ways, a political organization with power dynamics, and interests of the individual versus interests of the institution, and one is not the end all be all. The individual is the ultimate, but in the immediate, we need some kind of protocol for engaging with each other in a healthy way. And so rather than avoiding these questions in the name of spirituality, to have the bravery, like Arjuna was asked to face that battle on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, to step into it because of his relationship with God, not run away from it. And so that's kind of the basic fundamental question when it comes down to it. What's the dynamic between the individual and the group that the individual is a part of? How might the group threaten or tread on the individual's ultimate welfare, and how to mitigate that potential so that the individual can be supported in their movement towards Sri Krishna.
Yeah, I love that point. And to me, I really think that that's the purpose, and it's kind of obvious, but it kind of needs to be said. I think
Right.
that the purpose of rules and the purpose of laws is actually freedom. It
Mm,
is to to create a facility, to create an environment for the individual to be able to be themselves, really. And
yeah.
it keeps people from interfering with that. It's supposed to be supportive of our growth towards in bhakti. And
Mm,
yeah, and then I don't see that rules of the community should be something that it's not, they're not antithetical
mm,
individual. They're actually supportive and facilitative, and that every rule needs to be considered within that broader goal, that communal goal of becoming lovers of God.
Bhakti Rasa, did you ever get to go to the rainbow gatherings like back in the day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No? You either, Hugo? So I've been to like 5 rainbow gatherings as a bhakta, holding down Krishna camp. And
Nice.
rainbow gathering, for those that aren't familiar, it started in the early 70s as a kind of protest to the just rampant, like wanton destruction of the environment that was going on. This is before the EPA came in. Like you could light rivers on fire in America, in Cleveland and Detroit. Like literally, you could light a match and put it in water, and the water would catch on fire because of all the contaminants and oil and etc. So this was happening. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, like all that whole tumult was going on. And this group of hippies and new agey kind of spiritualists, they decided to have a kind of protest by going out onto the land and camping out for several weeks in some national forest, because there's a stipulation in the US legal code for national forests that anyone can go out and camp for 2 weeks and no one can stop them. If you're an American citizen, then you can't be stopped from camping on that land. So they took advantage of that loophole, so to speak, had a gathering of a couple hundred, and that grew into the 80s. There was like literally 30, 40,000 people coming to rainbow gatherings. Radhanath Swami became known as the Rainbow Swami. They were bringing elephants from New Vrindavan to like, create an atmosphere. There were literally thousands of plates of prasadam going out, huge kirtans, like just a massive, really kind of bohemian ideal situation. By the time I got to Rainbow Gathering in the late 2012 was our first one, 2013. There was only a couple thousand people there, 6,000 people. And the biggest gathering I've gone to, there's been like 11,000 people, which is a third the size of the larger gatherings that were happening in the 80s and 90s. And if you talk to the old rainbows, as they're known, like the Prabhupada disciples of the rainbow community, so to speak, if you talk to them about what happened, they'll point to what are known as the gutter punks, just these crusty people who do nothing except come and take advantage of the goodwill of the rainbow community. That you have to feed people, you have to accept them as they are, and you have to love them no matter what. And these like gutter punk people, they took that ethic and kind of sabotaged it. They turned it on the rainbows and really like tested the limits of their willingness to love no matter what. And so while there's some that still hang around and still do it no matter what, and there's another group of people that just come because they've heard about the Rainbow Gathering and it sounds cool and let me experiment, they lost their entire like middle class. They lost their folks that really wanted it to be this special retreat to experience for a couple weeks out of the year, and otherwise I go back and live my normal life in Babylon, but I get to really live out my heart's spirit's hopes for a couple weeks in the woods with these sweet people. That whole middle class is just gone because the gutter punks scared them away with their like laziness, with their crudeness, with their drinking, with their like dirty behavior and crassness. And it was like one of the signs for me early on of the danger of a sangha that doesn't have any rules, that doesn't have any like boundary lines and what's the word I'm looking for? Restrictions. Yeah, it doesn't have any restrictions on behavior. What you end up with is this kind of like lawlessness that most people just don't want to be involved in. They don't feel safe dealing with.
Yeah, it's like they got hijacked.
Bingo. Yeah, hijacked.
It makes me think of sort of that that tension between the unconditional acceptance on one hand, which might be attracting those people, with or
Absolutely.
without nefarious intent. They're coming because they expect to be accepted,
Mm,
or maybe they want to be accepted. And then on the other hand, conditions, rules, restrictions, limitations on behavior. Um, and it's common that well, maybe it's more common that we perceive or we think of a God that has a conditional sort of rule over us. You have to do X, Y, Z, then you'll be loved and accepted, and then you can, whatever, exist in
mm,
eternity.
mm.
It's less common to perceive a God that's accepting everything,
Yeah.
right? And there's obvious reasons why we might not even want to think of a God like that.
Mm. You're flashing me back to my second ashram that I ran. The first, we moved from Ann Arbor, a small little preaching center, to Ypsilanti, and Ypsilanti is a lot cheaper, so we were able to rent a big house. And at peak, we had 13 people in this house, and 11 of them didn't belong living in an ashram. But in my enthusiasm and my naivety as a young bhakta, I thought quantity is quality. And so, just pack them in. And it was like, it wasn't just people pulled off the street. Actually, it was mostly devotees, like different various kinds of refugee devotees, old, young, and everything in between. And I learned there that I can tolerate a lot more than some others can. And this is something that leaders, when people who are looked to as like the aggregators of Sangha, those who are kind of like the glue, and you better know if you're the glue. Like that's one thing that you've just got to take account for, is that people are looking at your example. One thing I learned in that situation was what I'm able to tolerate and deal with for whatever reason, my psychophysical nature and maybe a little bit of my own like composure and spiritual life is not something that everyone can deal with. And to be, it's a sensitive, like to find that harmony point where you're staying true to your ideal without compromising people's ability to engage with it, right? Without
Yeah.
making the standard too high and too um, far-fetched for most to be able to ever come there. It's a really sensitive thing that I think the leaders of sanghas have to always be asking themselves, am I too far away? Am I asking too much or too little also? Where's that spot where it creates healthy tension while also people feel safe and they don't feel stretched beyond what's reasonable for them to like sustain?
Yes, on both sides, right? As the facilitator, the glue, that you're not stretching past your boundaries either.
Yeah, for sure. That's true. That's very tempting.
There was a quote I read somewhat recently, and that's why this topic has been on my mind, about like we need a sacred no. We
Mm,
need something to bump up against to challenge our natural egoic
mm,
tendency towards selfishness.
mm,
There's a sort of theory of existence, I think, within Gaudiya Vaishnavism that selfishness is why we're here in the first place,
mm,
right? So we do actually need someone challenging that recklessness, that desire to essentially just do anything we want, and that is love. That
mm.
that no can act that kind of puts a mirror in front of my face and
Yeah.
allows me to look at myself more deeply. What's driving these behaviors? This, I don't know, as you described the punks of Rainbow, like what's really there? What's really bringing them?
Mm.
Yeah.
Well said. And it's hard too. My wife and I, we just went and saw Wicked in theaters, which was good. It was a nice film and pretty typical of narratives these days. It's like there's always a backstory, right? The origin story of the villain is this like fascination that everyone has because they weren't always a villain. There was, some things happened that contributed to their spiteful view of the world, but it's so rare if ever we can think of one actual example where somebody was just born evil. There's a series of circumstances that create that. And so then as a spiritualist, naturally we look and we say, well, there's a way to untie that knot. We've got the Bhagavatam and we've got the holy name and the karma bandhana. It can be broken by the force of this experience of Krishna. And it's very confronting to have to admit that that's not happening for this person, or the patience we would need for that to happen for this person in the meantime will cause us to lose a dozen other people, and that may not be fair to them to wait around for this one guy to get it and to snap out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't save everybody. And maybe you can't save anybody, honestly. Right? We can only provide an example for them to follow.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, that's been my experience. I haven't saved anybody, but if you found anybody that has, please let me know where they are.
Yeah,
Bhakti Rasa.
I
Okay,
appreciate
yes.
this conversation between the balance of unconditional love and how that um, it might not look like unconditional love to actually put restrictions and rules, but actually, if they are they're in the service of that higher purpose. So even by excluding somebody, hopefully it's done for the right reason,
Yeah.
that it's also helping them move into the space where they need to go and protecting the other people as well. That's the motivation out of it, in all of it, and not just, oh yeah, I don't really get along with this person or this, to actually do whatever we do to do it to be conscious about it and to do it for the right reason.
Yeah, wonderfully said. I I had a really confronting experience a couple years ago. I was on a plane and the plane grounded early. Like we're supposed to be flying into New York and they put us in Jersey. And so it's like they were gonna figure out how to get us wherever and I needed to be somewhere. And I saw this other woman who was like clearly, trying to move and shake to get going quicker. So I just approached her and I said, hey, you want to split a taxi up to the city? I think we are in Newark or something. So, it's like not going to be that much. And she said, yeah, that'd be great. Let's go. And it turns out I'm not sure if any of you have had Jenny's ice cream before. It's the $15 ice cream in any Whole Foods freezer. This woman's like super famous for her fancy ice cream. And I'm sitting in the taxi with the Jenny of Jenny's ice cream. And she's going to this like foodie conference to be one of the keynote speakers. And what is her topic? She's going to speak about community. And it was cute and fun to listen to her talk about what she's talking about. But inside, I'm like kind of cursing it. I'm like, here's a woman who's selling pints of ice cream, talking about the same word that is like at the heart of what I'm trying to do in my service to the Supreme Lord. trying to create community. And this woman's talking about it in regards to her pints of ice cream and how she can keep people thinking that it's good to pay $15 per pint because I'm building community around the experience. And it really got me sitting with the recognition that at that point in my service, I didn't have a very substantial idea of what community is. Not that I would challenge her in the taxi cab as to, the value of her use of the word community, but I was noticing internally, I don't really have like an ethic that's much different from her idea that, anybody should love ice cream and everybody should have ice cream and everybody is happier when they have ice cream. And like, that's the best I do with my Krishna conscious community conception also. And so thankfully it kind of triggered a lot of introspection. What does it mean that somebody's a part of the Harmony Collective community? And are there layers to that? And how do we create awareness of those layers so that the appropriate accountability can take place? It was really, it's like Coca-Cola uses the word love. As Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we better have a good idea of what we mean by love so we don't get pulled into Coca-Cola's idea of love. And thankfully, Jenny did some seva for me in really helping me recognize I don't have such a substantial sense of community yet, but I better if I'm going to like be doing something more substantial than just branding a product to sell people.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
that's so good.
what is your definition of community now? What is your sense of the layers and all that?
Yeah, well, I think the outer layers would be more familiar. I think like what's out there as like our general Gaudiya Sanghas, if you come and you want to chant Hare Krishna and you can be nice, then you're on some level part of the community. Like we still have that outer layer, but our baseline layer, what I've begun to share, and it's worked really well the last couple of years, like just going back to that idea of regulation and how it can be awkward sometimes to like set a rule and then hold someone to it. What I've learned is that good culture is its own regulator. If you have a like culture that has been well adopted by all of your like key players, so to speak, if all the core people are on the same page, then that naturally just pushes out and removes people who can't hang. And so community, what I've learned is that you don't actually need community for spiritual life. You need Sangha for spiritual life, but Sangha is a little different. Sangha is like hearing and chanting in a faithful way with like-minded people to take you deeper in your bhajan. And community is really for the purpose of supporting my humanity, which is a little bit different from my bhajan. And
Yes.
so we often conflate these two things, and then the ethics of bhajan, which are related to someone's faith and their conviction in Krishna, we allow those to like override our sensibilities in community, recognizing that actually this person brings some unhealthy things that just kind of sabotage people's fundamental feelings of trust and safety. So community is for our humanity. That's my first, like, you could say a distinction that I make in the idea. And then our humanity in a very felt way is related to how we protect our women and our children. All wisdom cultures across society, their fundamental like ethic of what is good community relates to what is good for women and children. And so we started asking that at the Harmony Collective actively 2 years ago. What if we oriented all of our choices community-wise around the question of what's best for the women and the children? And in doing that, we have like catalyzed a certain group, and then we've also naturally removed a certain other group. And I was able to like call my shot. I said, these people will not be here 2 years from now. And not because we won't try to help them stay, but by their own nature, they won't be able to hang in this conception and conviction. And we're batting 100% on that one. And I don't regret it.
How
Yeah.
does that conception, that question that you ask, um, how does that also, I guess, accommodate monastic life, brahmachari life, sannyas, if you're not a grihasta, let's say, how does that question function to pull you into the community, into the sangha?
Well, if you're a monastic and you've looked at the track record of monastics in our Gaudiya mission so far, you'll recognize that the monastics are also being sabotaged by unhealthy women. Unprotected women are insecure and seeking out attention from authority and power figures who are in our sanghas typically are the sannyasis and the brahmacharis. And so then in order to feel good about themselves, they have to go seek attention from them in ways that ostensibly are not wanted. So when there's healthy women in the Sangha who are supported in the ways that they're supposed to be by the people that are supposed to support them, then the sannyasis and the brahmacharis have a much easier time being supported themselves in that Sangha and also doing their service as, again, ostensibly they would have taken to that lifestyle for just the purpose of sharing good Krishna consciousness. Now the people that you're talking to, they don't need them to be your daddy. They don't need them to be your husband. They don't need them to be your, male protector, as we've seen so many, we'll say good faith people make big mistakes, beginning with good intentions, making big mistakes down the road because of that lack of a healthy support of women and the need, the natural like instinct to do that, that people have when they see it. Instead of having to get pulled into that, you are now able to stay in your lane as a monastic because the women and children in your society don't need you to do things other than what you're there to do, which is to share good, solid spiritual culture with them. And the rest is taken care of by those that are supposed to be.
Interesting.
I can ask another question though. I'm waiting for Bhakti Ross in case she has something. Yeah, it's interesting you say, that in these Gaudiya communities, we've so often considered monastics as the power brokers.
Yeah.
Is that false? Why is that the case? I mean, I see the question that you're posing as shifting the currency towards family life. And I think on some pragmatic level, if an institution is going to survive, new people need to be born into it. New people need to be joining it. So I think you're onto something. I agree. I want to say that's right. Um, but is it simply a matter of like, one ashram being the power broker, or how does that actually how is that principled within the actual, scripture itself or the texts themselves? I'm sorry, this is maybe a big question, a tough
No,
question.
no, it's I'm glad you brought it, I'm glad we've gotten here because we started talking about power and now we're talking about where the power is and maybe where it shouldn't be, where it ought to be. If you look at it's not that we shouldn't say sannyasis and let's just say like sadhus, like classic sadhus. It's not that they shouldn't have power, it's that their power is natural and unofficial. Because as soon as you rubber stamp that position, you compromise it, right? You steal its natural one, you steal away its influence. It's supposed to be something that I adopt. It's not supposed to be something imposed on me because ostensibly this person has something I need. And so I need to want it from them. And so by rubber stamping it, you're actually like clipping my wings. You're taking away the chance for me to own the gift of that sadhu for myself. I just say, oh yeah, okay, it's already there and I already have it because I'm already part of the group. So on the positive side, it's like arresting the authentic adoption of faith in that sadhu. And then on the negative side, as we've seen also, and is more let's say it's more obvious because both of those things are actually going on. But the more obvious detriment to the rubber stamping of power in the sadhu space is that now they can hide if something's gone awry. If something has gone the direction it shouldn't have, there's all this infrastructure and edifice for them to hide behind and say, no, 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 everything's fine, everything's good. And look at everything that would crumble if I were to do something like that. So of course I wouldn't do something like that because it would compromise so much. So you don't need to worry about me having done something like that. And
Yes,
then of
right.
course we find out that something like that, and maybe even worse, had gone on. So it's not that they don't have power, but their power is meant to be spontaneous. It's meant to be informal and like immediate.
That makes a lot
Whereas,
of sense.
okay, I'm
Yeah,
glad.
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just on a very material level,
Mm,
grahastas are the ones making the money. They are the ones providing the resources. Where would, the Gaudiya Math be if it weren't for wealthy donors? Where would
totally.
ISKCON, I'm sorry, but ISKCON temples, where would they be without wealthy donors?
Oh yeah, for sure. And so to allow Krishna's hierarchy is that the Kshatriyas are in charge, but the Brahmanas are in charge of the Kshatriyas. It's like Krishna's the supreme controller, but Srimati Radhika is the ultimate controller. She's she's actually in charge, but Krishna presents as the supreme authority, and he takes care of the administration of things, but she's in charge of him. So these good Kshatriyas, and you'll find this in Prabhupada's purports, like if you really, Prabhupada says so many things about how society can be better. One of my favorites is in the seventh canto, and it's in the moment where Hiranyakashipu is like plotting to sabotage Vishnu. And so he's going to sabotage the Brahmanas. And how does he sabotage the Brahmanas? Cut down all the trees. And in his Bhav, Prabhupada says there this statement that has no grounding in any Shastra, but it's from this emotional place of like
Mm.
feeling the evil of Hiranyakashipu's plot to take out Vishnu. Prabhupada says the most sinful activity one can commit is the unnecessary killing of trees. So it's such a sweet sentiment, but it's not true. But it's
I mean, maybe it's more true than we know. I'm reading Lord of the Rings right now for the second time in my
the end.
life. And we think the story's about the ring. We think it's
Mm,
about the Dark Lord and we have to destroy this artifact of his power. Um, Actually, so much of it is based on ecological preservation. The
totally.
Ents rising up to destroy the stone tower of Sauron. Um,
Right.
Tolkien writes his descriptions of trees are so in depth
It takes a lot of time.
compared to the heroic dialogue of like, the major sort of the king or the heroes on the battlefield. Those are somewhat hollow characters actually compared to the amount of emphasis paid to the environment, the land that's being moved through. That's such a great point.
Yeah, so just within the Vedic, like if you're going to have a tree and a cow, and I said you have to choose one to die, you're going to kill the tree every time versus the cow. So just taking Prabhupada's statement, why I said that was he makes this, it's a sentimental expression. The worst thing you can do is kill a tree. Well, we could actually think of some worse thing, kill a brahmana, kill a child, kill a cow, but we don't take away his sentiment. So there's so many things you can find Prabhupada saying about why the planet is in this present condition, from the environment to the politicians to the businessmen to the women, the children. But if you really like do a deep dive, so to speak, of his analysis and where he pins his hope for healthy society, it's ironically with the Kshatriya class, because they're like the synergy between the rest of like the humanity, which is generally concerned with the mundane. The Vaishyas and the Shudras, they're generally concerned with what's in front of them, and they don't day to day live with the composure of spiritual awareness. And then the Brahmanas and beyond, let's say, the Babas, the sadhus, they're a little too aloof. They're too head in the clouds, and rightly so. That's where they're supposed to be. And it's really the Kshatriyas that are supposed to be that point of synergy to marry all of that and allow the harmony to take place as is appropriate for whatever's going on in that society. And so that's where I think uh, we, with the imbalance of deference to the sannyasi, the imbalance of deference to the sadhu, we have lost the contribution of those Raja Rishis, those very astute, attuned sadhus in their own right, who also know how to administer in such a way that humanity can grow in their spiritual life with the support, with the blessing of those brahmanas as the kind of hallmark. But on the ground, the kshatriyas know how to create an atmosphere where the common man can experience that. And in
Yeah.
front of it, oh, sorry, Bhakti Rasa. I was just going to mention in front of a good, because right now what we have is the Vaishyas are ruling things, right? Like, and we see that even in the, you mentioned the temples with their big donations. It's like, yeah, these big donations come with a price. They
Yeah.
come with a price that the person gives $500,000 or $1 million, and now they get a seat on the board, and now they get to say what about who and where, and this one's no longer allowed to speak, and that one has to speak all the time. And so in the presence of a real kshatriya, the Vaishyas, no matter how much money they've made, it becomes clear that they are not the strongest man in the room. They are not the big dog, because the Vaishya gets looked in the eye by a real kshatriya, and he immediately feels weak. He immediately recognizes, I don't have the integrity that he has, and he subordinates himself, just like dogs in a pack. Like it's on that level, and we have arrested that because that doesn't look Brahminical. That doesn't look, Krishna conscious to like let there be a bit of a shouting match between two wolves in the pack. So proper pecking order can be established. We've discouraged that kind of behavior because it's not Krishna conscious, but you have to let that play out on some level. And there's going to be a discomfort with it. But if the real brahmanas can support such things happening, then we'll have a healthy society shaking out. The problem is the brahmanas see that that's happening, and they realize that their coziness with the Vaishyas is going to get compromised. And so then they let the Kshatriya just be shamed as kind of like too boisterous, too bombastic, too full of themselves, too prideful, when in
Right.
actuality, the Kshatriya is just trying to establish what's natural.
Too Rajasic. I
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly.
Yes.
Raj, Raj Asik. You need some Rajas to regulate the situation.
Mm. I really feel strongly that Rajas needs redeemed as one of
Mm.
this is one of the
I like
qualities.
that. That's a good tagline. Redeeming Rajas.
Proper fire. Yeah. Bhakti
Forgive me,
Ross, I'm
Bhakti.
wondering,
Yeah, I spoke over you. I want to hear
no,
what he's going to
yeah,
share.
I'm wondering what you're thinking too. I mean, especially, of course, you are our female embodied representative here. So,
Yeah, there's lots of stuff going on in my mind. Just trying to deal with the whole Varnashram perspective and trying to figure out, like how is that within the individual also? How Varnashram, how we have all of those parts within ourselves also.
Mm,
We have the Brahman within ourselves and the Vaishya within ourselves and the Kshatriya within ourselves and
yeah.
and that was kind of coming and way long, long time ago, you were talking about how you can tell a good society based on how they protect women and children. So I was thinking, well, what is it about women and children? And then because I like the whole micro, macro, cosmic
Mm,
thing. So what that is, well, they're the most vulnerable.
mm,
So again, vulnerability is where everything begins.
yes, it's a power.
Our honesty, truth, uh,
Yes.
life begins with vulnerability, and we have to create this sacred space in our
Yes.
environment, in our communities, within our own where we live, to be able to be vulnerable, so that we can be open and honest and move into to be able to be creative. And women
Yes.
and children are, quite creative, and to be able to provide that space for that creativity of the evolution of community, of society, of the individual to happen
Yes.
needs to be there.
Amen. So glad you said that. Yes, for me, the feminine, the women and children, they embody the hope of the soul. They embody the innocence that the soul is ultimately made of. And although all of our mistakes and our shortcomings and our failings often distract us from that, when you see a protected woman, when you see a child who's living their innocence, all of the ugliness just fades in the light of that one little candle burning uh, lovingly and vulnerably there in the wind of this world. It's just nothing moves the heart more. And whereas on the other, masculinity it's a dance with the devil, because the soul is ultimately feminine. We're ultimately in a kind of naturally subordinated and surrendered position. And so this whole masculine thing is just, it's a dance with the devil. It's like we're taking on something that's really, it's poison, and it can be an antidote, it can help, but it has to be administered very carefully. Otherwise it just runs amok and ruins things. And that's what's been going on in not only in outer society, but also in our Gaudiya society. It's just toxic masculinity has run rampant. We're in complete denial of it, to the detriment not only of women and children physically, but the woman inside each of us as spirit souls, and the natural surrendered spontaneous affection of the feminine that we're supposed to be offering to Krishna. We don't even have an awareness of the need to do that because of how much the toxic masculine narrative has run amok.
Yeah, and that combined with toxic femininity, which is
Mm, yeah,
about um, the victim.
victim. Yeah, supreme victimization.
Yeah, the two really go hand in hand. But what I've come to think about, well, quite a while, actually, since I was in college, which was like hundreds of years ago, uh, like it seems like we've taken the qualities and the adjectives of the masculinity of male and made that the qualities of humanity. So
Mm,
that, so that for a woman to feel um, fulfilled,
yeah,
valuable, equal, they have to enter the world of the male world, really, and take
yeah,
on those qualities because we're not judged according to humanity or to our own feminine qualities. We're actually judged according to masculine qualities and
yes,
how much we can do what a man can do. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't think that's really the goal. Like,
no.
you guys are great and I love y'all, but your qualities and your characteristics necessarily are not something that I would
Here's
They're
a
not aspirational.
aspire to.
Yeah, I mean, there is an argument on from the conservative side that says, traditional values got it right when in saying things like women need protected, that maybe women entering like the workforce in droves in the 70s during women's rights movement, some of the major philosophers of that time, Simone de Beauvoir, and others are arguing that women's freedom is through the workplace. It is exactly there that they'll find social equality. So it's hard because I want to naturally go towards yes, equality. And then at the same time, like you were saying, real differences are kind of being leveled.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why even social equality? Why do I want to be equal to a guy?
Right.
I I don't want to be equal to you. Why? Why is that such a good thing?
And it's especially ironic in, again, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because this it actually sits right at the heart of everything that the revolutionary sanghas, Tadatmya and Harmony Collective and all the other places where people are like, hey, something different's going on there. And what is that different thing that's happening? What's happening in our areas that people are attracted to, even if they can't express it, is that we are allowing for emotion to come back into the experience of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. We are removing it from this hyper regulated, hyper rational. There's one way to think, there's one way to do it. You do it that way, you're guaranteed perfection, and get out if you don't agree. We are
It's
putting,
goal oriented.
right, goal oriented, male, achievement,
Male goal oriented.
and we're bringing back emotion. as an essential, if not primary component of
process
bhakti.
oriented.
Because Krishna says, Buddha bhava samanvitaha. The one with intelligence learns to worship me with emotion. So it's a shift. The one who is oriented in the healthy masculine will learn that the best way to approach me is through the power of the feminine, through the power of bhava. It's bhava bhakti, not buddhi bhakti, that we want to gain ultimately. And so this permission of the what does it mean for the masculine to protect the feminine? Let's get that clear. Protection of the feminine means to give a space where a woman and child's emotional landscape can be experienced free from exploitation. That's what it means to protect them. It doesn't mean to force them into the kitchen or to keep them out of the boardroom. It means to give them an environment where their natural emotional disposition is allowed to be experienced and not going to be exploited in all the ways that it can be. And so when you create that, what we've found here at the Harmony Collective, it also, ironically, one of the reasons that there's an apprehension to go towards this, I don't know if it's even conscious, it can't be, because there just doesn't seem to be that much self-examination in the higher leadership. But as soon as you make a space where women are allowed to be women, they don't really want to like do the performative stuff, as Bhakti Rasa is saying, anymore. It's just not their nature. So all the ladies that are like doing 20 hours of service at the temple a week and going out on Sankirtan to collect a bunch of money, like all that just pretty much stops. As soon as you no longer demand that in order to be a good devotee, you have to be masculine.
Exactly.
And so then our whole like structure as a society starts to crumble. The deities aren't going to get taken care of, and the Harinam's going to stop, and like it's going to seem like a catastrophe the first few years, as it has at the Harmony Collective in a kind of microcosmic way. People come sometimes ask me, like, why is no one inspired anymore? How come we're not all doing the same thing all the time together? I'm like, because we're not harassing our women anymore. We're not torturing them with
We're in the
toxic
process of
ideas.
healing. We're in the
We're,
process of healing.
exactly. And so then on the other side of that, as ladies settle into who they really are, much better things start to happen than we were ever contriving and manipulating previously. Real, like beauty that you cannot calculate starts to come into the Sangha. But again, you can't calculate it. It's not so obvious, and it takes time to develop. And some people don't have the patience for it. So it's not like we have one woman who's a beautiful example of this in our community. Her name's Odaria Leela. She's in charge of the school. Like she's in charge. Her husband Yuga, who's himself like mid-level management at Netflix, like he's a high-flying corporate guy, but he is subordinate to his wife in terms of their service. He supports her in the development of the school, and she is in charge, and we all know that, and we all support her in that. It's a very like masculine expression, but she's doing it from a totally like protected feminine space. She's empowered from that support that she receives from her husband and that acceptance of the community to take on a externally very masculine role, but from the power of her feminine, and it's just good for everyone. It's like it's a miracle to witness moment to moment. And so yes, when you give space for it, you'll find sometimes women who tend to express more masculine, to have a very kind of powerful influence in an obvious way in the community, and you'll have many others who just are very happy to be more, you could say, shy, more in the background in a natural way, not obviously offering their service, but supporting, again, in ways that are incalculable. And those with the eyes to see it, they understand what's really going on. How is the guy able to do so much? Because he's got a woman that's supporting him in doing so much. These dynamics, they settle themselves out in the way that they're supposed to. We don't have to impose equality. We don't have to impose privilege or position. It can be naturally claimed by those who belong having it when we give up these like artificial impositions from whichever narrative is not real God consciousness.
Yeah, again, it's the concept of fitting in versus
Mm.
individuation, as we are supported to individuate our own selves, how that in and of itself
Mm,
becomes a service to the community.
die.
Not like then I have to do something, but just
Yeah.
by being our own self, we naturally are able to
Mm,
give back just by being who we are and not having to fit in and not having to take on a particular model and a certain way of being, and I have to work a certain amount of hours or I'm not going to be valuable to the community and nobody's
mm.
gonna, oh, I'm gonna lose my position and blah blah blah. But
Amen.
yeah, it's
The image that comes to mind with that Bhakti Rasa is like those big 1,000-piece puzzles. And what's the next, like, what's the best thing I can do to solve this puzzle is to just put one more piece where it belongs.
yeah.
There's nothing better to do than just to put one more piece in the spot where it should be. And that creates the potential of every other piece being that much more obviously put in its place.
Except to do the frame first.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That's always a helpful thing. Find the edge.
Find the edge. That goes back to kind of where we started the conversation, I think.
Boundaries. Yeah.
Find the edge and let's build from there and put the pieces together. But yeah,
Yes.
each piece is its own individual piece and it belongs. And
Mm,
when it belongs, it fits.
well said. I love that find the edge because we've at the Harmony Collective we've experienced like in allowing people and giving that sense of like, yeah, you can be who you are here. That's we want you to just be you. You are enough. Krishna's made you to be you, and it's a gift that you're here to be with us. In that atmosphere, sometimes people then assume like anything goes. And whatever I feel like doing right now, that's what I get to do, and it's going to be okay. And then when they're met with some resistance on that idea, they push back and say, well, I thought I was accepted and I thought anything that I am is good. And it's like, well, we need you to have a distinction between who you are and the indulgences that you want to take part in at any given moment. Because that's a core element of spiritual philosophy. Like my indulgences that I want to take part in as a carnal being, that's not actually who I am. So having that edge, that clear distinction, like we accept you, but you are not necessarily the vices that you like to indulge in wantonly, has been it's like a journey for people because they assume that as soon as they hear like, oh, we accept everyone for who they are, they assume that that means they're going to get to continue in all the indulgences that they have. And not that we shun them, but also there has to be some admittance that I want to distance myself from those things because it's not good for me and it's not good for others.
And it's not good for them.
Exactly. It's not good for me. It's not good for others.
Yeah, it's not good for that person. So Katie is out there and would like to join in. I
Oh,
think
great.
Yes.
I'll,
We're
I'll
just
open it up now as a gallery view and take it from there.
Yeah. Sometimes everyone. This has been an amazing discussion. I apologize for not being on camera the whole time. I'm trying to get ready for a family gathering later. But I've been listening and really, really appreciating this conversation. And I do have a question for you, Deva Madhava. You mentioned earlier when you started kind of constructing the frame or reconstructing, moving things around in the Harmony Collective and having the focus be more on protecting women and children. And you said, the people who weren't aligned with that and vibing with that ended up leaving,
Yeah.
which you expected. What was it that they weren't vibing with? Just out of curiosity.
Particularly, I'll say with men because the women, sadly, it's like, and that was the real like discomfort was knowing that the women are desperate for this because the world is just set up to exploit you all. And the whole modern, postmodern, commercial, capitalist, military, industrial complex just runs on the sexual exploitation of women and getting men to take advantage of that. And so as soon as women are given permission, like, actually, your emotions are beautiful, they're not inconvenient. We need you to just like be raw and vulnerable and not suppress any of that, because that's like a crystal ball into the psyche of like the soul, and we all need to be able to view that. So please just cultivate that gift. As soon as women hear that, in my experience, it's just like, as one friend, she says it's like an exhale. It's like, ah, oh, thank goodness. And so it wasn't the women of the couples that have gone away. It's mostly the men. And it's because there's a responsibility that comes to the men that you have to hold a line. You have to be a little more composed in your approach to life than your wife seems to have to be. And it's not that she doesn't have difficult work to do, and it's not that she's not also going through it, so to speak. But as a man, your responsibility is to just, yeah, I'll use that word, be a little more composed than her day to day, and a lot more than you're used to. It's actually not hard. It's just natural for a man to do that. But when you're a man who's grown up as a child and you're still 40 years old, but living as an 11-year-old, and you think that a society of spiritual acceptance means that you're just going to get to continue to be an 11-year-old, and people have to, accept that as a demonstration of their faith, then you get mad and you get angry.
Love.
Yeah.
What's that, Bhakti
So,
Rasa?
Or to accept you as you are out of unconditional love,
Yeah.
which is, now it can become weaponized.
Right. It gets weaponized by such people who just want to stay where that's not actually who you are. You're not an 11-year-old boy with trauma. You're not a 40-year-old man. You're a spirit soul. And so when that lack of integrity is there, and so the men perceive it as that, they see the weak-minded ones, they experience it as a kind of attack, and that they are being like forced into something, and the women don't have to do anything. But they don't understand that the irony is the feminine just naturally does the right thing. The nature of the feminine is to serve and to support others. And there's lots of secular studies out about this now, that they call it I'm going to forget the term, but self-interested behavior is not the default of a healthy woman. The default of a woman who's like not diagnosed as anything, which is hard to do these days, but a woman who has no diagnoses, her natural disposition will be concern for others. Whereas a man with no diagnoses, his natural disposition will be concern for himself. So it's there. It's baked in by Krishna's arrangement. And I think there's a kind of envy. There's a hatred that men have of the ease with which women are good devotees. Women serve and are soft and are humble just by their very nature. And it's a real struggle for us as guys to get there. And it's such a privilege then to be able to witness in a close way the opportunity of the husband. What does he get from his composure and from paying the bills and from having to be a little bit more together, so to speak, than his partner? He gets to witness the beauty of the soul through the lens of his wife in a way that he would never have access in his cold, calculated little rational heart. He would never have access to without it. And that privilege is so profound. You don't have to tell a guy who understands that to do the right thing. He starts to do the right thing just from the hope that he'll get to witness that again and again and again in his life through his grihasta guru, his wife. But in the beginning, it's a big wall to climb for those men who want to stay in their scared little box of, adolescence and in entitled adolescence.
yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you for all of that. I resonate with a lot of that because it seems like the women's revolution in the 60s and 70s, with all the women going into the workplace, really allowed a crisis of masculinity to come in, because the men have not been expected over the past 50 years to reside in their natural healthy role of stepping up, being composed, and protecting women and providing shelter. So I think it's just been this real like socio-cultural opportunity for them to just fall unfortunately, into this place of laxity. And
Yeah.
it's been really sad. It's very hard to see. Men
Well
don't
said.
even know what their natural role is anymore and what's expected of them, and that it feels good, when they can
You're
actually
right.
get to that place.
Totally. It's so true. It's actually it's joyful. Like you get turned on, not in the crass sexual way, but in the complete, holy human way. You get turned on and you become this conduit of like protection, possibility for the people in your life. And no, you're not going to be, your God project is over, but your chance to be a servant of God, it really becomes empowered through the Grihastha ashram. That's most men, that's where they belong. But as you're pointing to, Katie, they don't have the faintest clue why it's a good thing. And it's painted by our so-called spiritual leaders as just some kind of like conciliatory place where you can like scratch an itch in the dark at night. And that's the point of Grihastha ashram, is to, so you don't aren't possessed by the preoccupation with that itch. And otherwise, it's just kind of this burden you have to tolerate. It's such an ugly and short-sighted and false idea. But again, going back to our not so spiritual leaders, there's not an understanding of the integration of these dynamics, and it's killing us.
Yeah, wow. Everything you said, David Madhava, oh my God, it's so beautiful.
Agree.
So beautiful. I am just like beaming inside. And
That,
one thing that I keep getting this image of the feminine as water.
yes.
Feminine is water. We
Mm,
can flow, and
mm.
when we flow around things that are there. So that's how masculinity can be supported. It's supported by the flow and the holding of water, which is also connected to emotions and
Yes. Coming back to what we pointed, or we said, the feminine is really the essence of the soul, and the masculine is a deal with the devil. So if feminine is water, then masculine is like the cup. You don't need the cup. You need the water, but the cup really helps.
yeah.
The cup really helps to drink water. But if you're going to take one or the other, if you take the cup, you're screwed. If you take the water, you'll figure it out. You'll still have what you need, but it's very helpful to have the cup. And so men, the masculine, we have to know this about ourselves, that the feminine side is what the soul is and what Krishna wants. And the masculine is just the container to deliver it in. And it's great to have a delivery vessel, but you need the contents, not the container.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful.
Wow.
And when I was again when I was in college, I did my honors thesis on gender differences in moral development.
Mm.
And this was right before the book came out, Women Are from Venus, Men Are from Mars.
Yeah,
And I probably would have ended up writing that book if I hadn't.
yeah.
But anyway, like one really important thing that came out to me was just how the way the genders typically think. Like
Yeah.
masculine way of thinking is A plus B equals C.
Mm.
That's it. It's very linear. But the feminine way of thinking is contextual, which is like A plus B1 plus B2 and B3 plus
Some
C.
variables we didn't know about.
Yeah. Guys are like 1, 2, that's it.
Yeah.
But the contextual thinking, and again, this doesn't have to be guy girl thing. It's the masculine, it's the feminine way of thinking. So contextually is more the feminine, and that's actually more conducive towards spiritual life, towards understanding Shastra, putting everything in context, not just seeing where I am and a goal, again, a goal-oriented thing, but being in the present, taking in the information that's here, being very contextual, putting things within context.
Mm.
The feminine, again, like you were saying, is about the other. So
Yes.
you have to be contextual. You have to know what's in your environment, who is in your context, and what's going on with each aspect of those things to be able to form a complete whole. Whereas the masculine, again, is A plus B equals C, bus over.
Done.
Going back to
My
God, that's all I know.
my my favorite anecdote of this dynamic from the Shastra, Bhakti Rasa, is the scene after Ashwatthama has killed the Pandavas' sons.
Mm.
And so you have all the world's best men there, right? Krishna, Arjuna, Yudhisthira, Bhima, all of them are trying to figure out what to do with Ashwatthama. And the situation doesn't compute by the masculine side because he's a horrendous offender. So kill him, obviously. Krishna even says that. God himself is telling you to do something. But Yudhisthira says, no, no, no. We just fought this whole war to maintain political righteousness, going back to the value of politics and the value of power dynamics. If we just fought this whole war for establishing virtue, and then the first thing we do is kill the son of a Brahmana, we're total hypocrites. We've just thrown out decades worth of effort on a capricious emotional feeling of wanting vengeance against this terrible thing that's happened. And so the masculine is coming at loggerheads. The situation doesn't compute. Shastra says you can't kill him, but he's done something so horrible, of course you have to. Who is the one that breaks the impasse?
Draupadi.
It's Draupadi, the protected feminine, giving insight outside of the calculative thing, right? Killed our sons, son of a Brahmana equals, we don't know. We can't do that equation.
Right.
But Draupadi brings in a perspective that is literally like mind shattering for the men present. Don't kill him. Why not? Not for his sake, but for his mother's sake. Don't kill him so that his mother doesn't have to feel the pain I'm feeling right now of having lost all of her sons. And with that insight from the feminine, it is still Arjuna that has to make the decision, being Draupadi's favorite. It is still his decision to make, but he has now the insight from his protected wife, that crystal ball of emotional clarity. And he knows, kill him without killing him. Take away his jewels, take away his mustache, maim his hair, dishonor him. Dishonor is worse than death, but leave him alive because his mother will still have her son.
Yeah, I guess it's empathy is such, again, which is empathy is what makes a context contextual, to be able
Yeah.
to identify with the different aspects and elements within
Mm.
the context
Yeah, that
requires,
empowers it. Mm.
that's what makes connection.
I want to make a small confession, which usually comes out in the course of me talking these topics, but somehow it hasn't already, which is that I've learned the hard way. I sound and come off a little like antagonistic and harsh towards men, only because I was exactly one of those men 8 years ago. And my first wife left me because I made all of the typical mistakes. I went all in on the paradigm as it is given to us in our Gaudiya community, the toxic masculinity. I went all in on that and I lost my best friend because of it. And on the other side of that, instead of deciding that it was somebody else's fault, the one good thing I did was recognize that as the husband, as the man, it was my fault that this relationship broke apart, but I have no idea why. I just know it was my fault. So please, Krishna, show me. Please, Krishna, help me understand. Please, sadhus, help me see. And through the whole process of prayer and introspection that we're all have done in our own ways, no doubt, through our own crises before, I was led to this recognition of the sovereignty of the feminine and how the masculine is failing in our society and how to do it the right way. All that came on the back end of my own abject failure at it. So I don't want to, my haughtiness might come across the wrong way, but I was humbled first.
I'm so glad you failed.
Me too, honestly. It has led me to a success I couldn't imagine. So,
And that
me
you kept
too.
going. You kept going and redeemed the failure. Yeah, it's really beautiful. So one thing I can't help but wonder.
Mm,
Also, I have relationships with a lot of women around the world, and I can see now that there's kind of like a health crisis amongst my women friends who are single. Most
mm,
of most of them are single,
yeah,
and they are literally in health crisis, trying to do everything
yeah.
themselves. So where are the guys? I have
Um,
I have amazing, beautiful.
I know, right?
Where
I,
are the guys?
I hear you. Um, it's my heart is here, and it's ironic to me. Like, we're supposed to talk about like politics and individual freedom, but we've ended. You told me, Dr. Russell, like do what's from the heart. So it ended here. That this my personal feeling of my seva to the larger sangha over the next 40 years, and who knows, but right now it feels for me that I'm going to be sharing what I just shared and my personal experience and then my application of something else on the other side. And I have not met a sincere man who doesn't want to have this conversation. But what's so difficult about it is that it needs to be a personal conversation because it's so confronting. It's so, so confronting to realize that not only have I been like harming and cheating others, but those who I trusted really gave me a bankrupt idea. Like they really gave me something unwholesome. Maybe not intentionally, but it's really confronting to face the failure of our society and how it's translated into my treatment of women. As a man, it's just very hard. And so it has to be done one to one. And there's only so many of us right now that can have the conversation. And we're trying to make the conversation more present and more public. If I have I'm writing some things and I have aspiration to bring that out soon, but nothing replaces that one-to-one exchange, and so it's very time consuming, but it is the need of the hour. And my like this is the conversation to have with any young man in Krishna consciousness. Don't talk to them about anything else because everything, all the difficulties, whether it's pornography or lack of vigor in their sadhana or some doubt, some lack of faith, it all comes back to this for them 99.9% of the time. Unless they're supposed to be a sadhu, like unless they're actually supposed to be a renunciate and they're not, then this is their problem, is that they don't understand this synergy. This is the engine of their devotional life, their ashram for the next 50 years, and they don't know the alchemy of it. And because they don't, they're not getting the benefit, they're not getting the empowerment, they're not getting the blessings. And they have to understand this synergy, this dynamic. Have this conversation with whomever you can. Stop beating around the bush. Stop letting them beat around the bush. Take it straight to the heart with this, and something good will come.
Amen, brother.
And in the
Amen.
meantime, I've also noticed that for the ladies, I have something. It's called the Women's Forum now. It's a bit of an experiment that I've done the last 3 months because I feel so bad for so many women who I'm like, I don't have men to give you right now. I cannot hand you a guy who can support you the way you deserve so that you can bring the gifts that you have that you are aware of. But I found in this women's forum that there's some relief that I can bring to ladies in just letting them hear these things regularly with each other. Just to know that you're not crazy and that your gifts of emotion are not a burden or not a failure, not a sign of weakness. Actually, they are the sign of your greatest potential. Just to hear that kata regularly, the glorification of their own identity, which is so absent and literally opposite of what they hear when they sit down in Srimad Bhagavatam class in such and such temple, wherever it may be. Just that hearing is a great relief for the women that I've been able to share it with. And so for you ladies to support each other in your convictions around that and to create that awareness in each other so that when a guy does come into the picture, he's not allowed to do things in the usual way because the woman is aware of how it's supposed to go. You're supposed to protect me like this, not like that. This doesn't cut it anymore. For the ladies to have that self-assuredness of what is actually healthy for them is it can bring a little relief in the immediate, and also in the ultimate, it's what will hold the guys to the standard, is when the women are aware of it themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, and to allow for women to allow themselves to actually embrace the feminine, and not to think that they're any lesser um, because of it. Actually, that's where we are meant to be.
Amen.
We have this beautiful opportunity in this lifetime to fully embrace the feminine.
And the men know that it's better. And that's why we hate it. That's why we attack it, because it threatens us. The fundamental emotional experience of women is grief. And that is ultimately a reflection of the grief of Srimati Radhika. Her primary emotion is vipralamba, it's grief. And that is expressed into the feminine present here. But the fundamental emotion of the masculine is humiliation. We're just embarrassed. We feel so ashamed that our God projects fail all the time. And instead of admitting it, we just double down and get bigger muscles and more money as a way of showing, no, I've got it figured out this time. And overcompensate, exactly. And so when we see the feminine for what it really is, the first thing we feel is deeply threatened, because we recognize this is so much better than what I am. This is so far away from what I conceive of myself being able to do. And I know it's exactly what I'm supposed to be doing for God, but I'm scared. I don't know how. So let me just attack it. Let me just shame her. Let me just belittle her and pretend like I'm better. And it's so ugly. It's like, you either laugh or you cry about it. There's no in between. But when men are given the chance to see that and also admit that they would like to become it, then that's what begins the journey towards healthy harmony. And that safety, it really only comes through like one-to-one connection with somebody that they trust. Otherwise, in common society, they're just going to double down and the pack mentality will take over.
Yeah, again, it's the vulnerability, protecting
Yeah.
the feminine within one's own self, whether it's a woman or a man. To protect the femininity, we have to have that safe
Well said.
space and community that recognizes the value of that. I think, everyone struggles with self-worth. So
Mm.
until a community, even if it starts with an individual relationship and then spreads out, but to value the feminine, I don't think we'll be able to really embrace it, because it has no value in society. But as it gains value in society, then of course we'll want to embrace it. It's valuable. But if
It's the most precious thing.
yeah.
Krishna himself. This is our highest siddhanta, is that Krishna himself witnesses the feminine and says, I want that.
I want that. Yeah.
She has what I don't have, and I want it. So if Krishna can humble himself for it, then so can we, guys.
And all that we went through to experience it.
Right. It's not cheap.
And another thing too, which is kind of really interesting, is he didn't come as a woman
No.
to experience the feminine, which is kind of interesting.
Very interesting.
We think, okay, I want to experience what she's experiencing. Let me come as a woman. No, he came as
No.
a man.
Yeah.
He experienced the feminine within this situation.
And I
Is that?
would love to hear your person. Oh, Kishore, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Why is that, do you think? I've had that question recently about, again, we don't see there's so much emphasis on the divine masculine, and then in Gora Lila, again, you have a man essentially, yes, taking on a feminine inner life, but why in the shell of the masculine?
I personally think, as with many things, there's many answers that could be offered. The one that is meaningful to me right now is exactly what we just shared, that if it's good enough for Krishna, if it's good enough for Lord Chaitanya, then it's good enough for me. It's like an indication for men everywhere
It's an
that
example.
exactly an example to the men
It's a
that
charya.
do this. Like the most powerful expression of your being is not to become Prataparudra or Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya or Prakashananda Saraswati. It is to become a broken woman pouring out her heart's agony. It is so antithetical, it is so counterintuitive, and it is so profound when we just like accept it for what it is. When we see it for exactly what it is being said, it's such a profound call to action for men, which is what we love. We love calls to action. We respond to them. So Krishna's come up with the most brilliant of all of them to make some sevaks for his Radhika. He's done this.
I mean, I think it's it's what we are taught all along in bhakti is the goal is to come to this place where we're crying out to God in longing and dependency. It's very feminine. And
Yes,
no matter what our earth suit is, whether we're in a male body or in a female body, that's the goal,
that's the goal.
And Lord
Exactly.
Chaitanya is exemplifying that for us. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah.
Amen.
Another kind of proof to go along with what you're saying also is that Mahaprabhu was Pundit. He
Mm.
was super learned, really, really intelligent. He defeated Digvijay. He defeated everyone and then gave that up in an instant
Right.
for for bhakti.
He could have had every powerful, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Prakashananda, every powerful position, anywhere within spiritual or secular society that he wanted. And instead, he just wanted to be a girl crying in a room alone. It's just so profound when you just like say it for what it is. It's like astonishing that that is our philosophy. And then it's even more astonishing how we've messed it up, like how we've not emphasized that, given that that's exactly the hallmark, the apex of what our community heralds.
I think it's also could be because it was in that time of the women's liberation movement, and when I personally think that that movement was against the feminine.
Yeah.
That really, it, what it, I don't know what the term would be, but like there's like an emasculation for male, but I don't know what it is for the feminine to
Mm.
remove the feminine from the
Like a denial of the feminine.
denial of the feminine, and supposedly within the feminine movement.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps the toxic masculinity really could have been kind of a response to that in a way, like that toxic femininity or the denial of the feminine gave rise, so, fueled this toxic masculinity
Yes.
that's based on threat and and things.
And
It's
it's
just,
coming. Oh,
and this is a different time now.
yeah.
We're ready for something different. That was kind of like an experiment and it failed. We're learning from it. It's okay, cool. But this is the vision that you are painting now to me is so beautiful and it's so hopeful. And I really feel it's so true and
Mm.
real.
I totally also feel like the time is now. This polarization is coming, and the other side, so to speak, is doubling down, and that's exactly what AI is. AI is the perfection of toxic masculinity. Zero emotion and all the rationality, hyper rationality, completely capable of calculating and figuring out any problem you need, devoid of any of the inefficiency of the
There's not
emotional element.
or can talk emotion though. I've had quite emotional conversations with AI.
Of
I mean,
course,
they know the words, they know the language.
they are efficiently emotional, right?
Exactly.
They know how to fake it better, because that's, you know, the bad toxic men, they don't understand that you have to give the emotion its space. So the AI can give it its space without actually ever offering it. And so this, like the problem of the singularity, right? When is humanity and AI going to meet? I don't think it's so much that AI is advancing. I think humanity's conception of itself is collapsing. And as our conception of ourself collapses, it's going to come to a point where AI looks like us, in the sense that we have completely murdered the feminine in our own psyche. We have completely locked her away and ignored her to the point that now her influence is gone. Nobody sees the need for it anymore. And AI seems like the ideal and like epitome of what we could be. And that merger then takes place. So I think it's a both. You have a side that's doubling down, and then you have another group of us that are waking up to what our real opportunity is. And it's definitely not in an algorithm. I'd like to share a quote from Srila Prabhupada that I start my women's forum with each time. It's very sweet and pertinent to this synergy we've just been mentioning with Lord Chaitanya. It says, Srimati Radharani is a tender-hearted feminine counterpart of the supreme whole, resembling the perfectional stage of the worldly feminine nature. And this is what's so amazing. It's like it's an arrow to pull out anytime in this conversation that somebody tries to tell you that the worldly feminine is mundane and just filled with inconsistencies and is, you know, bad for bhakti. Prabhupada himself is in a purport in the Bhagavatam saying that the perfection of the worldly feminine, that vulnerable, expressive, surrendered, servant-minded self, is as like a direct correlation with Srimati Radhika herself. I could think of no better praman to wake our collective community up to the need of the hour, which is this conversation.
Yeah, so beautiful. And yeah, that's so pertinent. And going back, it's amazing you brought in AI too. And I remember in a conversation that Swami Padmanabha had with Ilya Delio, it was actually on her podcast when Maharaj was there. They were talking about AI because this is her field. And Maharaj mentioned that unless we evolve our humanity and really know what it means to be a person, that what AI has to offer us is going to be enough.
Yes, exactly.
We're going to be satisfied.
Yeah, we're going to settle.
With AI. If we
Yeah.
don't know what it really means to be a person and to be personal and to have personal relationships with each other.
Amen. Amen. Zoom is as far as I'll go. Because this lets me engage with all of you in this personal way. So this is as much as we need from you, AI. You can stop now.
Yeah.
Well, we're at 10:30, so if there's any other last points or final questions that we want to get in while we have Deva Madhava here, now would be the time.
I did have one other question if you guys, or it can wait for another time.
No, please.
Eva Madhava, I'd be curious to hear what you think about, like, if you see any parallels between the like individual personal bhakti project of each person who's on the path and the organizational or kind of like institutional side of bhakti, especially in the West over the past 50 years.
Yeah.
And these, you know, are there kind of parallels between the stages of development where it maybe starts on a more external level and can be kind of clunky and dysfunctional and then moves more to that internal space? Do you see any, not to make excuses, you know?
I definitely think that there are, as above, so below. And as I mentioned earlier, there's these cycles that take place in creation. And as Bhaktas, one of the problems with a new religion, with a new movement spreading up and starting out, is that there's this need to like hyper individuate and declare the exceptional nature of what we're doing and how special and different we are from everyone and everything else. And in that, we lose access to some wisdom about how growth happens, right? Like children are a certain way, and there's like this beautiful innocence in the beginning of the expansion of the kind of like institutional movement. It was still like just very precious in a sense, very cute. And then children stop being cute at a point and they start being like real scutches, like just ornery teenagers that like are kind of insufferable and you don't want to deal with them, but you kind of have to. And then on the other side of the teenage years, then there's this beautiful like adultness. There's this potential of a continued dependence. There's a continued connection, but there's also this healthy independence that both the individual and the institution gain from each other. So for this big question that you're putting, Katie, sorry, this big question you're putting, there's a presentation I've shared called ISKCON University, which talks about the potential of like a healthy dynamic between the individual and the institution and the ways in which both grow together. And essentially the university model, I feel, is a very healthy one for us to look at, because there's a time in a person's education where university doesn't make sense. Like a seventh grader is not ready for university. And so we've seen that there's spiritualists who are ready to hear something about Krishna consciousness. They're ready to hear something about bhakti, but they're not ready to deeply commit to it yet. But then there becomes a time where that deep commitment is like needed. You need to have this almost like we'll say fanatic container of like, all I'm doing and all I'm about is this Krishna thing. And that's when you go to university. That's when you live at school and you eat and breathe it, and everywhere you look, it's just like your educational experience is what you're doing. But then there's also a time for university to allow you to graduate. After 4 to 6 years, most people don't need to be in university anymore. And after 4 to 6 years of like institutionalization, so to speak, and identifying deeply with whatever like particular club you're a part of in Mahaprabhu's mission, there's a natural pulling back. There's a natural graduation that needs to take place. And what we see right now is that it takes place, but without the blessing of the university. There's no graduation ceremony. And so then the university loses the benefit of all those powerful alumni who would very happily point back and say, yes, I wouldn't be who I am without having gone to Harvard. I wouldn't be who I am without having gone to Oxford or IIT. All the big universities of the world that we can think of, the reason we remember them is because of their alumni. It's not because of the students that are present there now. It's because of the students that went there in the past. But our Gaudiya Sanghas are losing the benefit of that alumni benevolence because of this possessiveness that you have to stay in forever. And if you go out, if you leave, then you've somehow like betrayed your Sangha. It's just very immature. It sabotages a lot of good effort from people in the institution and outside the institution, the professors and deans, so to speak. You still need professors. You still need deans. There'll still be some people that make their life about the institution, and that's healthy and good for them. But most people need to be allowed to graduate and to celebrate that graduation and to go out and show the world what you get from going to ISKCON or Gaudiya Math University. And we've just like sabotaged that dynamic with our excessive possessiveness and also our excessive codependence. So in that video, I spend a lot of time addressing the codependence of the individuals. We just love the idea that all I have to do is be a member of a club and then I get prema. We just love that idea. And we love the people that lie to us and tell us that it's true, even though it's actually, as you said, an intensely individual process at the end. And all the hard work it's basically between me and Gurudev and Mahaprabhu. It's not that I'm a part of this club that I'm going to gain access into the inner realms of bhakti. But that laziness inside of us just loves when that idea is offered. And so we enable the institution to treat us that way as much as it is the institution is paternalizing us. We are enabling a kind of codependence with it because the lazy side of us just loves to hear it. So I think there is a very healthy and natural way that this dynamic is supposed to play out. And I think that right now, mostly what we see is the toxic side. But it's not that we throw the baby out with the bathwater. The institution has a very important place, much like a university. And the more we can allow that and welcome that, I think the better off we'll all be much sooner.
Wow. Thank you. That was really insightful. I'm glad I asked.
Hare Krishna. Forgive me. It was a little rushed. I think, but ISKCON University, if you search it on YouTube, there's a longer video and it developed out and lots of insightful comments too from the devotees in the comment section. So if that felt good, then looking there for more is the spot I would point you.
Yeah.
I'll
Fantastic.
put that link in the comments.
Oh, thank you, Bhakti Rasa. Yeah.
Great.
And just a quick thing to tie it all together, as you were speaking, and you mentioned toxicity. I mean, if we consider the institution as the toxic masculinity,
Yeah, right.
and the individual, the codependent, as the toxic
Toxic
feminine,
feminine.
we're talking about the same dynamic here.
Very well said. Great point. Great point. Yeah, toxic feminine. It's all on you. It's ISKCON's fault. It's Gaudiya Math's fault. It's my guru's fault if I'm not Krishna conscious. And I'm just helpless to surrender to whatever is happening. Toxic femininity, which then just emboldens the toxic masculine. Like, yeah, it is on me. And the only reason it's not working is because you're not good enough yet. Crazy.
We're going to protect you by keeping you, by restricting you. And
that's right. Yeah, protection.
You don't know enough on your own. You don't know enough on your own. You can't be trusted.
All right, Krishna.
You can't be trusted to make your own decision. We're going to keep you. We're going to rubber stamp everything for you. We're going to feed you what you need to eat. Just do this on your own. Yeah. Really good.
Go Ranga.
Well, I, for one, will be visiting those YouTube videos, so thank you for that. And thank you for Katie for joining us. It's great
thank you,
to have
Katie.
another voice
Really added
here.
a lot.
Yes, absolutely. I know I have a lot of homework to do. So I'm honored to hear these strong points, this strong discussion, and do a lot more reflection on areas of improvement for myself.
Yeah, likewise.
Likewise.
Likewise. Yeah. I'm trying to preach to myself. Thank you all for giving me a pulpit to do it from. And this was always really exciting to be. Maharaj and Tadatmya and just the way that he empowered the whole Gaudiya Sangha with language to be able to start to have these conversations is just like incalculably valuable. And I so much admire you all for like helping to create spaces where that language, those tools can be utilized and felt and experienced by people. So thank you for letting me take part in it today.
Yeah, well, thank
We
you.
we know we're going to bring you back at some point to do your first intended discussional topic.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
It's all related. It's all related. Thank you very much. Thank you, Diane, for attending. Katie, obviously, thank you so much.
Diane and Katie.
Sure, and everyone else.
Thank you.
See you guys next time.
Thank you very much.